Good morning, everybody. Pleasingly, overnight, we haven't had any new cases of community transmission, which is a positive sign because that is really what we are looking for. We've had 3 cases overnight, but they were all 3 people in quarantine. And I want to thank everybody for coming forward and getting tested because the weekend still showed up to 8,000 people getting tested on the Sunday, which is what today's results reflect. So I want to thank everybody for coming forward and providing that extra testing on the weekend. Please keep that going. We know, again, as the winter months have arrived, that cold or flu-like symptoms are likely to be more common. Please don't assume it's a cold or flu. Please assume it's COVID. Please come forward and get tested. It's so important. Our easing of restrictions will only work. I can't stress this enough, will only work if people keep coming forward to getting tested and people practice good social distancing and hand hygiene when they're outside their home. Today, pleasingly, I'm with Minister Constance and Howard Collins and, of course, our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Kerry Chant, to say that in view of easing restrictions, we're also pleased to be able to say that health advice has now allowed us to increase capacity on the public transport network from 1 July. So from 1 July, the ability of the transport network to carry more people in the peak and during the day has been increased, and this has been based on configuration of where people sit or stand on a bus, a train or a ferry. And in fact, we now will be able to confirm from 1 July that if you see a green dot, it is safe to sit or stand there, and that new configuration will be available from 1 July. Now, this is pleasing for those people who work in places like the CBD or people who do rely on public transport. We're still encouraging people to travel outside the peak where possible, but now we will have extra capacity in the peak, almost doubling capacity in the peak from 1 July, which is great news. I want to thank Minister Constance and the Transport for New South Wales team, who I think have brought around a world-class way of being COVID safe. I don't know anywhere else in the world which has those indicators for the customers, but also the apps and the on-demand services that let people know what is happening on their particular service in real time. This is world-leading. I'm incredibly proud of what New South Wales has done and want to thank Minister Constance and Howard Collins and the team at Transport for New South Wales for making that possible. Minister?
Thanks. Well, good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to recognise and thank the kindness of commuters over the past month. What we've seen is people looking out for themselves and looking out for each other. And we always said that we would take step changes when it comes to the rollout of transport, and that's what we're going to continue to do. As of July 1, we are obviously going to be able to put further capacity into the network, which basically means that we can see 68 people on a Waratah train, 23 people on a bus, of course 450 on the freshwater class, 40 on a light rail carriage, 65 on a metro carriage as well. And this is about people following the green dots, and they've done that so successfully over the last month, and I really do want to thank commuters for that. I also want to thank our business leadership, who is doing everything they can to make sure that people retime their day. In terms of what we'd like people to continue to do, with short trips, please try and walk or cycle. We've seen an incredible uplift in the number of people cycling across the city over the last 5 years, but also people are looking to do that safely as life returns as normal as we can get it. So it's really important that people continue to follow the guidelines. We still have marshals out there. We're continuing to clean trains on average about 3 to 4 times a day, our buses 3 to 4 times a day. We are urging commuters, if you feel the slightest bit unwell, don't get on the transport network. Go and get tested. Don't jump on with a runny nose. We've got everybody to make sure they stick to these requirements, and we can continue to keep this at bay. So this is an important announcement today. At the moment, the network has gone from basically 580,000 people to about 870,000 over the last month. This will give us capacity up to about 1.3 million people, particularly if people retime their day and reschedule the way in which they get around. We've also not returned to the normal traffic volume levels that we saw last year. So year on year, we're still about 6 million vehicle movements less than this time last year. So there is that capacity for people to still drive should they choose to. But ultimately, thank you to everybody for the way in which they've conducted themselves over the past month. Kerry.
Thank you. I'll just provide the update on the cases. There's been 3 additional cases in the last 24 hours to 8 p.m. on the 15th of June. And as the Premier indicated, these were all in returning overseas travellers in hotel quarantine. The total number of confirmed cases in New South Wales is 3,134, and there were 7,895 tests conducted in the 24 hours. Pleasingly, we've done over almost 650,000 tests in New South Wales since our response commenced. There are currently 46 COVID-19 cases being treated by New South Wales Health, and none of these are in ICU. Thank you.
Well, obviously, we know that some businesses have already made arrangements with their staff. What we're saying to people is avoid the peak hour on public transport where you can. However, we are increasing the capacity of peak transport. So please keep in touch with your office. The other great feedback I've had is that Transport for New South Wales has been in touch with large employers in the CBD to talk exactly about what the transport capacity is, and then businesses have made those decisions based on that. But there is a significant step change. From 1 July, essentially half of the capacity on the public transport system will resume, which is pleasing. So based on that, I anticipate that more people will be resuming their jobs in their workspace. And this is really up to the businesses. Some businesses have made plans for further out in the year when they're returning some staff. We also know that some businesses have essentially split their staff into and have a roster system where half are working from home and half are working in the office during various times. It's really up to the businesses themselves to determine, but our advice is if you can avoid the peak, do so. Please stagger the travel times, but we are increasing capacity in the peak for those people who have no option and who work those particular hours, which is pleasing. It means from 1 July we have a COVID-safe way of increasing capacity on the network. And again, we ask everybody, as the Minister has said, to identify those green dots. If you see a green dot, it's safe to sit down or stand, depending on where the dot is. And please also manage your activity in and around those busier hubs. If you're in a major railway station or at a bus stop, please maintain your social distancing. It is as important to maintain your social distancing as you're waiting to get on a mode of transport as it is on the actual mode itself. It's really, really critical to respect social distancing when you're at the bus stop or in fact at the railway station when there could be a lot of people around you, and it's really, really critical. And to date, we know that a vast majority of commuters are doing the right thing. It's very pleasing to see that in the last month things have gone so smoothly, certainly exceeded my expectations, and we're hoping this will continue. But it's positive news that from 1 July that capacity will be increased.
You've always said that social distancing is geared towards your vaccine. So given these maps, is this now the plan that significantly will live under?
Well, we always rely on the health advice, and whilst the current health advice is what it is, this is the safest configuration. If in the future the health advice said you can relax the 4 square metre rule or you can relax something else, we'll obviously would look at this. But this is the current health advice, and this is the best configuration within that health advice. We will always have to be COVID safe until there's a vaccine or a cure, and what we need to do is make sure we keep a pace with the best health advice and also look at the data. And because we have been managing the community transmission during the easing of restrictions the way we have that confidence to keep going the next stage, and certainly the next stage on the transport network will be from 1 July.
How concerned are you? You have pointed in the past that other countries of public transport where the virus spread, and this is it's doubling effectively of people. Are you concerned about
Oh, of course. There's always that degree of concern, and I'm always concerned about what easing of restrictions means, especially in relation to the community transmissions. But the positive news is that unlike other places in the world, in New South Wales, when we've reopened something, when we've given the green light to a business or to an extra mode of transport, we've made sure it's COVID safe. So businesses have to download a checklist to be COVID safe, and our public transport network has these indicators where commuters know where to stand or to sit, excuse me, and also what is very pleasing is that the real-time apps that we have give commuters that information about what's happening on their service. At the risk of being immodest, I don't know anywhere else in the world that's doing this. We are actually world leaders in this, which I'm incredibly proud of, and credit to the Minister and his team, to Howard Collins and the team. Absolute credit to them. The key thing moving forward is that every time we ease a restriction, the new arrangements have to be COVID safe. You just can't go back to normal. Countries which have just gone back to normal have then had to shut down again. We don't want to be in that position. I hope we're not. But if things go the way we are, there's no reason why we can't live in a COVID-safe way and have some semblance of normality. And that's certainly what we're aiming for in New South Wales, having people go about their business, go about their lives, but just always being conscious of being COVID-safe no matter where they are or what they're doing. Well, if there was no social distancing, you would say yes, but because we have that social distancing and the configuration, that's not a requirement. If people want to, that's up to them, but the health experts say if you have good social distancing and good configuration, that's not a requirement. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Alex. Well, the good news about water prices is when we came to government, New South Wales had some of the highest water prices in the nation. Now we have the lowest or second lowest. So you've seen a very good reduction in water prices, and we want to see that continue moving into the future. The best advice I have is that in the near future, people will see further reductions to their water bills, and that's what we want to continue to see happen. And of course, if we get the expected rainfall over winter, as we hope we will, our dam capacities are back up to 80%, which is a welcome relief from the 60 or 50-something% we were some months ago. That is a welcome relief, and I think that also indicates that people should expect to pay less for their water bills in the near future.
Will renters be paying more?
I'm sorry?
Will renters be paying more?
That's not my advice, but I stand corrected on that. It's not my advice. But please also know that through Service New South Wales, we have 70 different rebates for people who are doing it tough. If you're currently on any type of payment, you do get reductions and discounts on your energy bills. And so please know that if you have any concerns with any type of bills, whether it's water or energy, please contact Service New South Wales, and our cost of living specialists will give you assistance in how you can reduce those bills.
What's the thinking behind making people pay more for water in a drought?
Well, please know that that's IPART's decision. So the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal has come forward with this proposal. So that is really a proposal put forward by them. And the thinking is that when there's lots of water around and we don't have to think as much about what we're using, that prices are low, but then when water is scarce, that could be more price sensitive. Now, this is IPART's thinking, it's not the government's thinking. I want to make that clear. But I also want to stress that the New South Wales government will keep working hard to keep water bills low. In fact, as I said, when we came to government, we had the highest water bills in the nation. The last time I looked, we had the lowest, but we're still at either lowest or second lowest bills in the nation, which is a far cry from where we were. And of course, our aim is to always have an eye on the cost of living, especially for those who are most vulnerable. And that's why through Service New South Wales, we also have a number of rebates for people who are doing it tough.
What's your opinion on
I'm sorry?
What is your opinion on the model? Do you think it's a good idea?
Well, I think all of us, because we've been through a deep drought, and even those of us in the city, have appreciated the struggles that all of us have gone through because of water scarcity. And I appreciate the thinking that's behind that. The thinking for the government or by the government is to keep prices down no matter what time of year it is and what circumstances we're in. But we also appreciate that we are still living with water restrictions, so people are thinking about how they conserve water. And in the near future, the positive news is that our expectation is that water bills will go down. So whilst we're going through the difficult times of COVID, whilst we know many people are worried about their jobs, the good news is that in the near future, the advice we have is that water bills will be going down, which is positive, and our aim is to keep them down.
Well, if you're thinking is to keep prices down no matter what year it is, can you do anything to change this iPad system?
Well, look, governments have these options before us, and we will definitely consider all of those. If you recall, when there was pressure on energy prices and we had the benefit of keeping our prices low, we also provided rebates on top of that. We're not in a situation to have to do that now because the advice is that in the near future water prices will be going down. But if at any time in the future that changed, of course we'd look at rebates or other issues.
Essentially ignoring the iPad decision.
Well, IPARTs, independent bodies are at liberty to make those decisions. What's important for governments is to make sure that we don't cause any undue stress on cost of living. In fact, if you look at the rebates we've given through Service New South Wales, in the last 2 years alone, in excess of $1.5 billion has been given back to the community through rebates. So we have various levers that governments can use to support people. But the good news is the advice that I have is that in the near future, water prices will go down. But if any time in the future that were to change or there was some change in circumstances, governments can consider other options to give people relief. Yeah, I don't have any specific advice on that, Alex. The best advice I have is that in the near future, water bills are going down.
Just in the economic update today, it's a big really set of numbers. How bad is it?
Oh, look, today would have been the day the Treasurer would have handed down the budget, and were it not for COVID, we would have been in a very strong position. That's not the case. But I'm also confident that the policies the government's put in place with a focus on jobs and pushing through with our infrastructure pipeline will put us in a stronger position. There are billions of dollars we don't have any more. The Treasurer will update the Parliament today, but we're looking at a revenue shortfall of around $20 billion over the next 4 or 5 years. Now, that's a huge hole in anyone's budget, let alone in the largest state of Australia. But I'm also extremely confident that the stimulus packages and the measures we've put in place will help us get out of this as soon as we can. I'm sorry, yeah. Oh, look, obviously, please comply with the requirements of the New South Wales Department of Education. I'm not across the detail as the Minister is, but certainly we expect everybody to comply. When you are given the benefit of taxpayer dollars, you need to use them in a particular way, and if that's not the case, you need to respond to the government's requests.
On this Goldwind pump hydro project, Goldwind Australia bidding to build this pump hydro project. What's the point of allowing them to bid for that tender if the Foreign Investment Review Board will just knock it back anyway? Because the Foreign Investment Review Board has in the past knocked back foreign companies.
Can I say I love the Foreign Investment I love FIRB. I love the Foreign Investment Review Board. As a former Treasurer, I relied on FIRB heavily, and I trust that FIRB has the right policies in place. It's not for us. You have to go through the proper process, and FIRB is the final arbiter, and I have complete confidence in them. Again, when I was Treasurer, there are a number of examples when FIRB stepped in and stopped what they believe to be an appropriate investment, and I know they will continue to do that.
Is Goldwind Australia the only company still?
I don't know. I'll have to get advice. Yeah.
We have strong enough rules in place to protect Indigenous heritage in mining proposals?
I don't know specifically in that area, but certainly I'm proud of the fact the New South Wales Parliament was the first parliament in the nation to pass legislation to protect Indigenous language and heritage and to support Indigenous children learning about their culture in our schools. So we have a strong tradition in New South Wales, and if there's more to do, we will. But New South Wales has always appreciated and respected our long history of continuous Indigenous culture. It's something we should all be proud of, and I know we are. And if there's more we need to do, we will.
Just on medical gas figures, yesterday you said that the regulation will be passed in the legislation, and now there's going to be government legislation in Parliament. Why the change?
Yeah, Liz, yesterday the best advice I had was that we were moving regulation, which we are, but to make it comprehensive and to incorporate a number of acts, which this covers, there will be legislation as well. So the regulation will be coming in force in the very near future. We're talking days, and then until the comprehensive legislation is put through the Parliament. Can I say none of us want to see any other family go through what those families experience. It's horrible to even think about, and these families are living with it every single day, and we need to do everything we can to make sure this doesn't affect any other family. And I say to Labor and the crossbench, we want to work together to make sure we get the comprehensive legislation right, and we want to make sure no other family ever goes through the trauma that these families have suffered.
Just back on top.
Yeah, well, the best advice I have is the current upgrades are safe. That is the best advice I have. But certainly the regulation will make sure in the short term that people with sufficient accreditation are undertaking this work, and the legislation in a more comprehensive way will look at broader industry issues. We need both. We need both the regulation, which ensures in the short term that the industry takes that immediate action, but also I've been advised that since that time there's no reason that any health person has any concern about what's happened in the intervening period, but we need to be extra careful in these circumstances. It is life and death, and that's why it'll be regulation plus. Please remember, the comprehensive legislation will take some time. The regulation will be quicker, but the legislation will also be there to make sure that the response is comprehensive and covers a number of acts which I understand will be impacted. I don't know enough about that issue, I have to say. Yeah.
But it's a company with links to the Chinese Communist
Right,
Party.
right.
Are you comfortable for a company with links to the Chinese Communist Party owning and operating a pumped hydro project connected to one of?
Well, can I say, firstly, there's strict laws against state-owned corporations owning any strategic assets in New South Wales and Australia, and I support those laws. And there's also the Foreign Investment Review Board, which makes sure that any of our strategic assets are not impacted by any. Doesn't matter where the source of investment is, any overseas interests. So I have confidence that those existing processes will protect Australian assets and protect strategic assets in New South Wales. And as I said when I was Treasurer, there are a number of examples when we were undertaking major transactions when the FIRB did its due diligence and prevented certain categories of investors not being able to invest in strategic assets, and I expect that to continue. But I don't know enough about that specific case. Yeah. Howard, yeah.
Sure.
Howard, you got a question?
I've got a question. Good morning, everyone.
Here we go.
With the new regulations, how have you've had people out marshalling? How has that gone, and will you have more to marshal with the team?
So the first thing I'd say is a big thank you to all the staff, but particularly our marshals and our transport officers who are out there. 100 as we speak are out there. Actually, we've had really good cooperation with our customers. They've done the right thing. They've guided and helped by those marshals, and that really has helped.
Just regarding, I've seen that
39.
We've got 39.
No.
Well, I know you've been parking there and spending your time there. You've been out counting every morning, so thank you for that. Howard could have done that for you. But look, I mean, part of this is that, we're not going to keep those car parks in operation long. They're only ever going to be pop-up and temporary. Sorry? Well, we're just going to watch over the next month or so. I've been liaising with Clover Moore on this. But the point out of this is that, as with any changes to a transport plan, people need to settle into that plan. It usually takes a couple of weeks, in some cases a couple of months. So with something which is as significant as we're going through, we're going to keep all options on the table to give that flexibility, particularly for motorists. As I said before, I mean, the numbers are still about 6% under this time last year in terms of the number of cars driving around city streets. So ultimately we want to, as the Premier said, get people to avoid the peak travel, and that means retiming your day and what have you. One thing I would say is that we do have some hotspots in the peak, so the hours between 6 and 7 a.m, we want people to try and avoid that period. That's particularly so our construction workers, our tradies, can get to their places of work. And the other hotspot is between the hours of 3:30 and 5 p.m. At the end of the day, when school kids and tradies and everyone's looking to go home. So we've put the extra services on. We've got the marshals and the staff, and I, like Howard, want to recognise the work that the staff have undertaken. and we're going to keep all options on the table. And in due course, as I said, it's only ever temporary in terms of those car parks.
They still do the green dots.
Yep, you bet. They
What about the green dot?
Yeah.
We're listening.
yeah, mate. Where were you?
Several
Keep putting
times.
68 green.
Go green, mate.
68 green dots on a Waratah.
Go green. Sorry,
So you'll put 68 green dots on.
68. So in fact, 450,000 green dots.
Times 8 per train.
Yeah, so 450,000 green dots are going across the network. So you go for that green dot.
Wouldn't it be better idea to put red dots where people wouldn't see?
No, because guess what? Green is a kind of colour in terms of encouraging people to go green and be safe. And ultimately, we're putting these guidelines in place so people are safe. And, obviously, green gives people the green light to sit on that spot.
Some of those green dots will be found on the ceilings of carriages, on windows, and is there a process where you expect the removal of the green dots?
Well, there's always going to be people who might, do the wrong thing. But I would ask everybody to remember, we're not through this. Complacency can kill with this virus. And that's why it's really important that we have those dots there for people's safety. So people shouldn't be tampering with them. We've got CCTV right across the network. Howard will tell you that, 11,000 cameras. So mucking around like that, we don't need people doing that. It's about people's safety. And that's all we want people to do, be safe.
Another serious question for Dr. Chant.
Okay.
We have seen a lot of the acquired case in Wollongong. Have you got any more indication? There's just been a few local cases. Have you got any more indication or an update on any of those local cases, the Laguna or the Wollongong one, where they've come from?
It's certainly good news on one hand that we actually have not found any other cases surrounding those cases. So that's very much a positive. And can I really acknowledge the communities come forth? Clearly the Sutherland community and the Sutherland LGA has come forward for testing over the last recent days, and we continue to urge anyone in that LGA to come forward with even the milder symptoms. And again, in the Illawarra, we're very interested in our approach, where we're trying to make sure that we have high rates of testing associated with any community-acquired cases. For each of these cases, there is some uncertainty about the timing of the infection, and so they may be a couple of weeks older. We're just waiting for some additional tests, and we'll update the community. But obviously, we're taking a very precautionary approach as we're trying to ease restrictions. We really want to damp down any community transmission to the lowest possible levels achievable. And thank you so much to the community. The testing levels have been so good, and it's really going to be a partnership with you to sustain that, particularly through this critical time of us easing restrictions.
Great. That was the last question. Well, of course, we're cognizant that every part of our economy needs a boost. And if we can encourage some of our smaller to medium-sized exporters to really feel confident to engage in their activities, well, the government's pleased to do that. We are about jobs all throughout the state. We're about boosting economic activity. And we know that when JobKeeper ends, there'll be a massive impact in the bush as well as the city on people who are currently surviving on JobKeeper, and that's why we're doing everything we can in the months beforehand to make sure we're prepared for when JobKeeper finishes. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Watch out.